My guest tonight, Donna Andersen, married the man of her dreams, only to find out it was all a lie. Join us in 5 minutes to get the details. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Good to see you all. Good to see you all. My name is Charlotte, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour. And I am the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based in sunny Sacramento, California. We're 35, 45 strong up and down the state. Yes, so if you have a paranormal need, just give me a ring up on, well, literally a PM on Facebook or a PM on California Haunts radio site, californiahaunts.org. Where else? Oh, yeah. Everything I have is public. So, I mean, you can give me a good ring, and we'll get out there. And the reason why we can get out there is because, you know, we have people, like I said, up and down the state. So we're in almost every county. So if you have some kind of paranormal need and you're in a county that we don't have somebody in, we're within driving distance to come out and help you. And the goal is to educate. We're not out there to be heavy debunkers or anything like that, but we're out there to look, you know, for logical explanations, and then work towards that paranormal thing. You know, 40% of us are logical kind of people, and the other 60% are the people that believe that things that go bump in the night do exist. So you're getting a real good mixture. And we're professionals. We're lawyers. We're doctors. We're nurses. We're construction people. So you're getting a good mixture of talent out there. And we also have some psychologists on staff to help you out as well, because there may be something else underlying going on with all this. You know? So we're probably one of the best. I'm honestly going to say this. We're probably one of the best teams out there. And we've been around for a long time. Anyway, welcome to the show. And we got a great show tonight. You know how I am about being a journalist and all. And I like to mix it up a lot. And so today is no exception. Yesterday we kind of mixed it up. Today is something clear and dear to my heart. You know, this happens to a lot of people. You know, I have a friend, an older friend. I'm not going to use the name because I knew them for years. And I remember her husband was one of these men that would not go. He had to have a say in everything she did. Every function she made in her home, everything. It didn't matter. He would pick her up after work. He'd take her to work every day. And at lunchtime, he'd be by. And he'd be timing her at her lunchtime. Especially if she went out to lunch with people. He would be sitting outside. And I saw him do this. He would be sitting outside with a wristwatch. Timing her. And if she was a minute late, she got a royal butt beaten, verbally, of course. You know, they would go shopping, and he did not like to shop, so he would drive her to the store. And he had it timed how long it should take her to go in and get her groceries. And again, if she was late, there'd be hell to pay. You know, so he was like that with her. They were an older couple, been married for years, but that's how it was in their house. And I've known it with younger couples. I knew a younger couple in their mid-20s who were like that. She'd have to go pick her daughter up at school, and he knew exactly how long it would take for her to go pick her daughter up. And then if she was late, he wouldn't say anything, but when she got home and started fixing dinner and everything, he would be going through her purse to see if he could find any evidence of her messing around on him or anything. Same thing with the ballet lessons, when the daughter started ballet lessons. So there's a lot of this going around, and women, unfortunately, you know, in the situation. And I'm not saying women are dumb. Women are not dumb, but depending on how, you know, your background and how you believe, you can get sucked in pretty good. So this is why this guest I'm having on is near and dear to my heart, because I've seen this with people that have been around me. You know, and it doesn't necessarily, abuse comes in all kinds of forms. Verbal abuse. When you live with somebody that's constantly putting you down. When you're around somebody that's constantly putting you down, or everything's your fault. When you have somebody in your life like that, where everything is your fault. I mean, but this lady I'm going to have on, Donna Andersen, you got to hear her story, because it'll open your eyes. And I'm so glad there are people around like her who want to tell their story, and who want to help others not fall into that trap or get out of the trap when they're in it. It is so important. So let me get Donna on, okay? And then we'll talk about other stuff. Like one more thing, real quick, before I forget. Saturday, there's 6 spots left for the event with Nancy Matz to do a 5-minute reading. $10.99. Check us out at California Haunts Ghostly Events. That's all I'm going to say right now. All right, let me bring Donna on. Hello.
Hi, Charlotte. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
I've been looking forward to this all day
Oh, good.
because, like I said, I have run into people who have had their lives run by their spouse or boyfriend, even boyfriends. I see, but that's what I understand is the boyfriend thing, because here you're not even married to the person. Those are the ones I don't understand. You know, not that I'm perfect, but I'm just saying. You know what I mean. It's sad.
Okay. Well, the story that you were telling about your older friend with the
Hmm.
guy who was following and taking his wife to lunch or taking his wife to work, picking her up, taking that's happens a fair amount in people who are involved with someone who probably has either antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, or psychopathic personality disorder. And the prime motivation of people who have these disorders is to have power and control
Hmm.
over others. And that is essentially the foundation of the relationship that when somebody is married to someone like this, they're the target because the woman in this case, I think you could call a target. Perhaps in the beginning, she felt like the man loved her because it's quite possible for them to put on a very convincing act.
Hmm.
They tend to, when you meet them, they tend to sweep you off your feet and tell you how wonderful you are and shower you with attention and affection. And then slowly they start with the control. First they start making a few little comments, and then it becomes complaints, and then it becomes telling them what to do, then it becomes limiting their movements, limiting their money. So there is a progression about this. And essentially it is about having power and control over the other person. And you were questioning about how this happens with a boyfriend or girlfriend or someone who isn't even married to the person.
Hmm.
And the reason that can happen is because these controls are emotional. And so they don't need the legal document in order to establish power and control, although that makes it harder to get out of it. But the key tools that they use are emotional. And so that can be done when someone is not married to the individual.
Does that come from? I mean, as far as picking a victim, I mean, could it happen to anybody, or is it generally women that have certain backgrounds too, where they they they, they crave that attention?
Well, first of all, let me point out that women are not the only victims,
Okay.
because it is quite possible for both men and women to have any of these personality disorders.
Hmm.
Typically, with antisocial and psychopathic and even narcissistic personality disorders, typically they say that more men than women have those disorders. It's like a ratio of about 3 to 1. But if you look at borderline, more women are diagnosed with borderline than men. Although the men who have borderline personality disorder, sometimes they can be violent. So it's messy all the way around. But as far as the targets are concerned, um, there isn't really a profile that you would expect of people who get into these situations, because sometimes you say or people think that, oh, they have low self-esteem,
Hmm.
or they have no confidence in themselves, or they're codependent or something like that. And that's not necessarily the case. There actually was some research done by a colleague of mine related to women who become targeted by psychopaths. And they did a survey, and they did personality studies with a group of women. I forget how many there were, but they wrote a book about it. But anyway, they did find some traits in women that put them at risk of becoming involved with a psychopath. And the prime trait was extroversion. How about that? People who are extroverted, who they like excitement, they like a lot of things going on in their life, they're go-getters. And this actually puts them at risk of being involved with a psychopath. And the reason is because, people like this tend to be successful. I know that I've collected more than 10,000 cases of people who've been involved with sociopaths. And I time and time again hear from professional, accomplished women, people who have the tiger by the tail. They're running a company, they're raising kids and all this other stuff, and they still get into this. But they tend to be confident and go-getters. So a woman like that often has a hard time getting a date, because a lot of guys are intimidated by someone who's that confident and powerful and has so much on the ball. Well, guess who's not intimidated? Psychopaths. So what happens is that the psychopaths, they're extroverted, the women are extroverted, and their extroversion is the point of connection between the two people. The two other traits that put women at risk are investment in relationship. And what that means is that women, they like special moments. Relationships are important to them. They're really willing to do this. And then the other trait is cooperativeness. Like the women who get targeted by psychopaths tend to score in like the 93 percentile for the trait of cooperation. They're willing to, sacrifice their own interests for the greater good, or to put other people before themselves. So it's these three traits: extroversion, investment in relationship, and cooperativeness, which are really the ones that put women at risk. So, we're not talking low self-esteem here. We're talking, these are the traits that they found.
It's just interesting to me because, like I said, I've known people throughout my life that, it may not be the person, they may not be with our sociopaths, but I mean, like, people that have fallen into a trap with somebody that has issues. I mean, even older, you see it with the older generation, like people that were married in the 50s a lot, because they're more used to being submissive to the man. And in the case of a couple people I knew, the man would do nothing but put her down and insult her like all the time, and she would go her merry way with it, and it was just like, wow.
Yeah, well, I've just come out with a new book, which is called Senior Sociopaths: How to Recognize and Escape Lifelong Abusers. And I did this research because the prevailing view in the mental health field is that sociopaths burn out in their 40s and engage in less antisocial behavior. Well, this made no sense to me because the reason I got into this whole thing myself is because I married a sociopath. I married a guy that took $250,000 from me. He cheated with at least 6 different women during our 2.5-year relationship. He had a child with one of those women. And then 10 days after I left him, he married the mother of the child, which was the second time he committed bigamy. Now, needless to say, my head was spinning when I finally started to find out what was going on. And I told my therapist about his behavior. And she said, he sounds like a sociopath. And I'm like, sociopath? What's that? So that's how I realized what I was dealing with. And also, because of that, I started looking into this, and I realized that I had a story to tell. But the thing is that nobody was talking about sociopaths back in the 50s, or it was, there was no understanding. In fact, this all happened to me in 1996, and it was 1999, when I finally started getting this idea that he was a sociopath. So there was no discussion before that. So, people had no frame of reference. I mean, they knew that they were being abused in so many, in subtle ways sometimes, if it wasn't physical abuse. They knew something wasn't right, but there was no terminology for it. So there was no way for people to talk about it. And plus, there's this whole idea going around, oh, just hang in there, he'll calm down, or she'll calm down, or they'll grow up. And my research for my book shows that that's not true. People who have one of these personality disorders, once they are an adult, they do not change. This disorder never goes away. In fact, quite a few of my survey respondents said that the behavior they saw was just as bad or worse after the person turned 50. In fact, that's what 91% of the survey respondents said. If they knew the person both before and after age 50, their behavior, their lies, manipulation, and deceitfulness was just as bad or worse as they got older.
So what happened in your case? You met this man, fell in love.
Yeah, and what he did was convinced me that we were going to be this great entrepreneurial team, and that he had all these ideas, and he's going to be a successful entrepreneur. He told me he was the next Walt Disney, and he's very convincing. So this is one of the things about sociopaths, is that they have this magnetism about them. They have this charm and this confidence and this commanding nature, and people believe them, because they present absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And he told me about his experience. I mean, the man was actually from Australia, although he lived only a half an hour away from me in New Jersey, so it wasn't like a long distance relationship to Australia. But he had made connections locally, and he kept introducing me to his business contacts and all this other stuff. And I believed him, because, in the meantime, he's, telling me that he's been waiting all his life for somebody like me, for me, actually, and yeah, he had other women before, but I'm the one. You're the one I've been waiting for. And it was convincing, and I was vulnerable. I was 40 years old and hadn't been married. And this is what sociopaths do. And this is also why it can happen to anyone, is because what they do is they target your vulnerabilities. And guess what? We all have vulnerabilities. If you want something, that's a vulnerability. And sociopaths are just expert at figuring out what it is that you want, what your vulnerability is, and use it to take advantage of you.
So you ended up losing what, over $200,000?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I claimed in court. In court, in my divorce, I claimed that he took $227,000 from me. And that was just what I paid on his business expenses, because besides that, I was paying all our household expenses. So I'd say it was easily 350 or something. I don't even know what the number was, but yes, I that's what, and he didn't, like, it wasn't, I was giving him money, and he wasn't extorting it. He wasn't stealing from my bank account. He just, convinced me that I was investing in our future together. He said we were going to be living in the lap of luxury, and, it sounded good. But the thing is with these situations is that fairly early on, I was getting very nervous about what was happening, and I realized that my money was going out faster than I wanted it to, and this is, all the money that I was making, and my life savings. But you feel like you're already in this roller coaster and you can't get out. And the only way to even get your money back is to keep priming the pipe and hoping that something comes through. So that's the situation I was in.
And how was he treating you during all this time?
Well, he was not abusive in the way that you mentioned. I mean, he wasn't following me around and controlling, not to that extent. There was no physical abuse. There was only one time, where we were arguing that I felt a little bit afraid, but he never hit me, or anything like that. But what he did was he was controlling in that, if I questioned anything, he would turn it around on me and either claim that I was paranoid or I wasn't believing in him. or something like that. And this is very typical sociopathic behavior, where you start to object, you start to ask questions, and somehow they twist it all around that it's all your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he did. He continued, he lied all the time. Of course, the thing is, when you're in it, you don't realize you're being lied to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not until you have a frame of reference after the fact, or you start finding some more information, that you realize that what you've been told is a lie.
And when did you start realizing that things were not right?
Well, I knew, as I said, fairly early on, that I was uncomfortable with all this money that was being spent. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he actually started, he proposed, and then shortly after that started asking me, to invest in the business. But the way he presented it was like, these businesses are going to be successful, and I want you to profit from them. So, if you give me the money, I'll put it in, and you'll have some percentage points of ownership. It'll be good for your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't tell me that he was taking the money to go spend it on other women, which is what he was doing, or something like that. So I was pretty nervous about it. And then I guess about 6 months in, because I mean, this whole thing only lasted 2.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
so about 6 months in, I was already out like $50,000. And I brought it up. And I mean, it was just classic, so it was, I made a list of all the money that was taken. And I asked for a meeting. That's how we had conversations. You can just talk to him. We have to schedule like a meeting, and I have all these other things on the list. And said, so now I want to talk about the finances. And I said, well, James, because his name was James Montgomery. I said, I'm like $53,000 in debt. And he says, so? And I'm like, well, I'm a little concerned about this. And it's like, we're going to be making millions. $53,000 is nothing, and totally dismissed my claims.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, and that was his approach all the time. It was like, yeah, what are you worried about? Just pay the minimum on the credit card, because, once this works out, we'll have all kinds of money. The accountants will take care of it. He would just dismiss any kind of claim. So, and that's what happened. And so later on, one project actually almost did work, and that was a Titanic exhibition. And so we were going to launch it here in Atlantic City, where I live. And it collapsed again. He actually got investors. He had a partner. He had investors. That money came in, and we were working on it, and then it all fell apart. And I was like, oh gosh, not again. And so then what happened was he told me that he cut a deal to open the show in Florida. So, we go down to Florida, and I expected us to be, working like crazy to get this show ready, and nothing's happening. So I finally asked, I said, well, when is the show going to open? And he says, well, I'm still sorting it out. So I'm like, you mean there's no deal? And he didn't even look up from his computer screen. He said, no. And so, I mean, I just about collapsed. It was like, he dragged us all the way down to Florida, spending money we didn't have on a gamble, and from his point of view, he rationalized it. Well, if you don't gamble, you don't win, you know? And, but then what happened is that, like we had collected all these Titanic artifacts to have in the show. And he told me that he had an opportunity to go to New York to sell these artifacts to this other company that was building an exhibition, because this was back in 1998. Titanic was hot. It was everything that was going on. And so I was like, yes, go. Sell everything so we can get out of this. And so I took him to the airport in Orlando, and on the way to the airport, we had a fight, because I was asking him, I was looking for some rings. I had some of my rings in my jewelry box. They weren't there. I was actually planning on taking the rings to a pawn shop to get money for groceries. I mean, that's how broke I was at that point. And so I asked where the rings are, and he says, they're in the lockbox. So, I leave him at the airport. We're still fighting. I come back to the house, the apartment that we had. I find this lockbox. I open it up, and the key's just laying right there in the drawer. I open it up, and there's pictures of him with a baby. So he had this child with another woman while married to me. and I found the birth certificate for this baby, and he was, it was conceived and born during our marriage. And my first response was relief. It was like, now I can leave. Because in the past, I'm thinking, what wife leaves her husband because the business plans aren't working out? Because I didn't realize, at one point I suspected that he was cheating on me, but now I've got this evidence, so it was that I could leave. And I did. I packed up and went back to New Jersey, of course, I driving a U-Haul truck and everything like that. And then I started going through all his papers here, and then I'm finding all this information about all these other women because, I never went through his stuff. I didn't want to pry. So I went through it all, and eventually I found these names and phone numbers, and it's evidence that seems to indicate that other women are giving his money at the same time. So I called one of the women and I said, "Hello, this is Donna Andersen. I'm James Montgomery's wife, and I'd like to recommend that you don't give him any more money." And she says to me, "It's too late. I already gave him $92,000.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that my whole marriage was a financial scam.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And it's amazing to think what he did with all that money. I mean, that's a big chunk of change, boy.
I never found any of it, and it was gone because eventually, I did get a judgment in my divorce, and the judge awarded me everything that was taken from me plus $1 million in punitive damages. So I've got my judgment. I'm going after him. So I did this international asset search. It was gone. There was no money, and plus I wasn't the only victim. There, 3 other women testified at my divorce, plus the parents of the wife before me who died. And from the 5 of us, he took more than $1 million. It was gone. It was just gone.
Incredible. Well, he must have been living high off the hog, boy.
I don't know what he did with it. It was like, I do know that anytime we went in the store, he bought whatever was on the counter. He just went through money like water. And so I don't know. I don't know what happened to it.
Was he verbally abusive to you or anything like that?
He didn't like call me names or things, but he would be critical. It's kind of hard to describe. He would just like berate me for not believing in him or something like that. And so every once in a while he would come out with a derogatory comment, but I wouldn't define it as verbally abusive. It's the manipulation that's the problem. It's how they get you to do things. And it can be hard to describe, which is one reason why people have a hard time describing it, because it's like it's something that you just kind of pick up, that he's being dismissive, or like he wasn't concerned about my concerns. If you love someone and you're married to them and they're worried about the money, if they really love you, that at least you're willing to talk about it. He just couldn't be bothered. It was like how I felt and my fears meant nothing to him.
Wow. So did he even show up to the divorce proceedings at all?
Oh no, he didn't participate. Well, he hired an attorney. The attorney participated for a little while. He never filled out the paperwork. He never did the income statement or anything like that. And then eventually he dismissed his attorney and stopped participating.
Were you able to sit down with the other ex-wives or the other women and talk to them?
Yeah, I did, because I wrote a book. My first book actually tells this whole story, and it's called Love Fraud: How Marriage to a Sociopath Revealed My Spiritual Plan. And so I did. I interviewed the parents of the wife before me who died. So I spoke to them, or actually mostly to the mother, because I was just about to interview him when the father passed away. So that was kind of uncomfortable. But then I also spoke to the wife before that, who lost a couple $100,000. I spoke to the woman who lost the $92,000, and I spoke to a few other people. So I interviewed multiple people for my for this love fraud book, and that's what makes it more in depth than a lot of books, because it's not just my story. It also is the story of all these other people and how they intersected, and it's really quite the read. It's good. It's a combination of a spiritual journey and a true crime novel.
That's what it sounds like. And what about the woman that had the baby?
Well, I actually did have an email exchange with her, and then afterwards, I helped her get her divorce, because he never told her that he was married to me. I was just some business partner who was flying off the handle, and he denied it to the end that he was ever married. Until she actually went with him to Australia, and then things started getting bad for her, so she came back here for a vacation, and that's when she was able to finally get my official divorce papers, from the state of New Jersey. And so after that, she gave him an ultimatum that if he ever lied to her, it was over, and he proceeded to lie to her, and so she divorced him. And I gave her her lawyer permission to use my documents, which enabled her to get the divorce.
So they never caught up to him then, right?
Well, the only thing that caught up to him was that when I found him, because he disappeared. He went back to Australia, and it took me a couple years after the divorce to actually find him and serve him with my papers. And when I did, that's when we found out that there was no money to be had. But at the time, I had started to build my website, which is called lovefraud.com. And one of the other things that I did was that I pursued his fake military claims, because that was what he did. He claimed to be a Vietnam War hero. He claimed to still be involved with special forces. He gave me these stories about going off on missions, and when in fact he was with another woman. And but he was so brazen about this that he joined the local Vietnam Veterans Organization. He was the keynote speaker at a Veterans Day ceremony. He just had no shame. He got up there, put this uniform on and talked about the war. And when he was never in the war, it was all fake. Wow. So, oh yeah, it just goes on and on. So I contacted an organization in Australia that was called the Australia and New Zealand Military Imposters. Sent him all the documentation, because he gave me all these papers, all his reports, and things like that. And they researched it, totally fake. Everything was fake. So what happened was, when my website went live, lovefraud.com, they put him up on their page of their phonies at the same time. And then somebody in that organization tipped off the Australian media, and it was all over the media. They called him, meet major fraud.
Major fraud.
It was great. It was great. So like every morning, because they're 16 hours ahead or whatever the time difference was. And so every morning I'd wake up, okay, what did they do today? And all this stuff kept rolling in, and he lost everything. He lost his job. He was asked to resign from volunteer positions at a museum, just all kind. Plus I just ruined his game, because the other women, found out about him and dumped him. So that was worth it.
I guess so. It sounds like it was. So, for women out there right now, what are the signs people should look for? Because I know sociopath was used kind of like a blanket, diagnosis for so many years. When I think of a sociopath, I think of Ted Bundy, because that's what they called him, was a sociopath.
Right.
So
okay.
What is the difference? Is there a difference between, obviously your husband didn't, that you know of, didn't kill people. But there is a difference, isn't there, as to what's Bundy's sociopath version as opposed to your husband's sociopath
Right.
version.
Okay. Well, the terminology is very confusing, And, that's one reason why people have a hard time figuring out what's going on. And the fact of the matter is that the professionals don't agree on the terminology, and if the professionals don't agree, I mean, what are the rest of us going to do?
Right.
So it's actually, there's this dichotomy in that the researchers in universities, the ones who are coming out with all these scientific papers, they use the term psychopathy. And the reason is that there's an instrument called the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, which is like how they measure someone's level of disorder. So, hundreds of papers have used this. It's validated, and it can differentiate, between bad cases and not so bad cases and things like that. But all the clinicians, like the psychologists and the psychiatrists, they have to refer to the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. And in that book, that's where they have the terminology antisocial personality disorder, histrionic, borderline, and narcissistic personality disorders. So it just depends who's talking as far as which terminology that they use. Now, antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy are very similar, although not precisely the same thing. Now, when it comes to sociopaths, that term was coined back in 1930, and originally it meant anything deviated or pathological in social relations. So it was an umbrella term. And that's how I use it on love fraud, as an umbrella term for all of these disorders. Because yes, there are differences among the disorders, but for those of us who are the targets, it doesn't matter.
Right.
We don't need to figure out precisely what the disorder is. If you're a psychologist or psychiatrist trying to treat somebody, yeah, you got to know. But for the rest of us, it doesn't matter. So we need to know that all of them are out there, and we need to protect ourselves from all of them. So I use the term sociopath to encompass all of them.
Sure, no problem, no problem. Because you can think about narcissists too. I mean, people get involved with narcissists all the time. They're out
Right,
there.
right. And what's happened is that the term narcissist is really being tossed around a lot these days. And personally, from what I've seen, it looks to me like a lot of people who say they are involved with narcissists are actually involved with people who have either antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. But I think they use the term narcissist because it's less scary. It doesn't sound as bad as being involved with a psychopath. And I think a lot of people are mischaracterizing what they're involved with. But again, it doesn't matter. As long as you know that that these people have these very serious disorders, they exploit and manipulate others, and they're not going to get better. So, I mean, that's really all you need to know about them.
Now, when you finally, when the dawning day came and you realized what you had been dealing with, did you have to go through, because you were seeing a therapist, so did you have to go through a lot of therapy in order to even like come out and function and talk to other people and stuff? Because it would make me really leery about being around people.
Well, actually, the type of therapy that I did was an energy counselor. So it was more on the spiritual side.
Okay.
And I had a long time relationship with this therapist for, quite a few years, even before I met my ex-husband. And which was good, because at least I already had a foundation. And so, yeah, it was a lot of work. I mean, when this happens, the first person you beat up is yourself, because it's like, why did I put up with this? I knew something was wrong. Why didn't I get out of it? Why did I keep giving the money? And you really come down hard on yourself. And just about everybody that I talk to has that experience. They just really, beat themselves up for having done this. It was painful. I mean, I was wiped out financially. My business was decimated. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had no money. I had no work. I mean, it was awful. So she helped me going through the process of releasing the pain of the situation, because that's what needed to happen. You have all this negative energy inside you, all the grief and the anger and everything, and it has to come out. So I worked on it for quite a while. Oh gosh, a couple of years, I guess, but you don't do it all the time, because you still have to live your life. You still have to figure out how you're going to survive. You still have to deal with practical things. So even though, I did spend, hours at a time, curled up in a ball, eventually you got to, pick yourself up and feed the dog, or something like that. So it took a while, but I got over it.
Okay. So you ended up writing 8 books, though.
8 books altogether, yes. Yeah, the first was The Love Fraud. Then I did one called Red Flags of Love Fraud, 10 Signs You're Dating a Sociopath. And that's the one where I lay out all the warning signs if somebody can see whether or not you're in a romantic relationship with somebody like this. That also has a little workbook that goes with it. Then I did a collection of 4 books, which are actually collections of my blog articles, because there's like 4,000 articles on the blog. So I did a collection of that. And then I just came out with the Senior Sociopaths book.
So tell us now that you've mentioned your book about how to tell that someone could be a sociopath, without giving everything away, because of course you want people to read your books. What are some of the signs that stand out?
Well, yeah.
At?
With romantic relationships, I did talk about the idea of the magnetism. I mean, the top thing is charisma and charm. These people tend to be very charismatic. They tend to be very charming, and just have this presence about them, which is very exciting. Then they engage in a behavior called love bombing. What that means is they shower you with attention and affection. They tell you how wonderful you are. They want to be with you all the time. They also do something which I call the sudden soulmate. You meet this person, and all of a sudden you feel like you met the person you've been looking for all your life. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is because the sociopath studies you, figures out what it is that you're looking for, and then makes himself or herself into that person. They also tend to have a lot of sexual magnetism. And the reason for this is because all sociopaths, whether male or female, have excess testosterone. So that makes people want to pursue mating, and they do a lot of pursuing and mating. So, now the problem, of course, is that like these first 4 signs sound pretty good. I mean, who doesn't want to date somebody who's charming and exciting and sexy and thinks you're wonderful and is showering you with attention and affection? So there's other signs, like, for example, blaming. All sociopaths blame other people for everything that's bad in their life. I mean, they never take responsibility for anything. And that's something that you'll see fairly consistently and fairly early in the involvement. So it's important to note that one. And then they also do something called the pity play, which is they try to make you feel sorry for them. So those are some of the warning signs. And the idea is that you need to see all of them. If somebody is, sexy and charming and thinks you're wonderful, that doesn't mean they're a sociopath. You kind of have to see the whole package. So it's important to know what all the warning signs are, so that you can figure out what you're dealing with.
And this can happen at really any age, not just, I mean, you talked about your book about the seniors, but I know there's even kids in school that are running into people like that.
Absolutely.
Running into other kids.
Yes. In fact, there's a reason for that. Most sociopaths start their manipulative and deceitful behavior at least by the time they're puberty. So, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, the people who have these disorders are starting with this behavior. And I have done some presentations at high schools, and invariably, every time after the presentation, a few kids came up to me, a few teachers came up to me. They're already dealing with these kind of situations in high school. So yes, it can start that young, and it continues till the day they die.
And what about seniors? I know we started to touch on that. We veered off of it. what's happening with seniors? Because I know, people marry, their spouses die, some of them are desperate to have another spouse, so they might step in even easier into a bad situation.
That happens all the time. And as I said, the main point, the main reason that I wrote the Senior Sociopaths book
Hmm.
is to document the fact that they don't get better. In fact, they get worse, because as I said, the prevailing view in the mental health field is that they burn out in their 40s. Well, it doesn't work that way. They continue to be, their bad behavior continues. And in many cases, it gets worse because when I asked that book, by the way, is based on surveys that I did with Love Fraud readers, and I had more than 2,000 respondents to the Senior Sociopath survey, and that was specifically asking questions about someone who they thought was disordered, who was age 50 or older. So that was the cutoff, because the professionals are saying that by age 40 they start calming down. So I figured, well, all right, well, let me start at age 50 because supposedly they would be calming down if they're starting in their 40s. Well, it didn't happen. And so that key question that I asked, if you knew the person both before and after age 50, how was the behavior? Well, over 50% said it was worse. And if you add up the people who said it was just the same or worse, it was 91%. So, this wasn't a little fraction here. This was overwhelming opinion, overwhelming evidence that they got worse as they got older. And in this particular book, it's not just about romantic partners, although that's most of the respondents, it was romantic partners, but people could write about anyone. So I had people discussing their parents, their siblings, other family members, business associates, colleagues, and neighbors down the street. So I have a chapter on each one of those types of relationships. And the point is that sociopaths don't just take advantage of romantic partners, although they do tend to treat partners and family members the worst. But this permeates their life. I mean, they're just as bad as neighbors, just as bad as business associates. So it's important for people to realize that.
I'm not laughing at the whole thing, but when I think about your marriage with your husband, with all the extra women, and we talk about the senior sociopaths, I'm thinking Don Juan at 70. So, but I mean, it's nothing to laugh at because this is happening all the time. Just like when you were talking about a lot of this stuff, I think about these women too that have that loneliness thing going on with the love scams, like on computers.
Mhm.
And that's what these guys are doing. They're telling them what they want to hear.
Right. And, that's a particularly scary situation because um, many of them, the scammers, are like based in Nigeria.
Yeah,
They're running. I mean, people do this scamming. They have a job. They like go to an office somewhere where they've got all these computers set up, and people are scouring the globe looking for targets.
yeah.
And that proves, or it's an indication of just how insidious this is, because the whole process is emotional, and these people figure out a way to hook into their target's emotions, even though they're on the other side of the world, even though they never met. And that there's everybody has these emotional vulnerabilities. And I mean, I couldn't figure it out. In my case, I knew the guy. I mean, we were married,
Right,
we were living
right.
together, and I couldn't understand, how people could, give all their money to somebody that they've never met before. But it's just that it becomes a big mental game, and what happens is they actually fall in love with their own fantasy, and
Hmm.
that's what goes on in these situations.
Hmm.
Because what
Hmm.
happens is, especially if you're communicating by text or email or online, and they're not doing a video chat or something like that, what happens is, you have words on a screen, and experts have found that 65 to 90% of the meaning of human communication is nonverbal.
Yes.
Now, if you're just reading words on the screen, that means 65 to 90% of the meaning is missing. Okay, it's not there. So what happens is people make the statements mean what they want them to mean. And through that, they fall in love with their own fantasy, which leaves them open to being exploited.
Well, and there's some cases too where these guys, they're sharp, and they're going to cut and paste poems from famous writers or from movies or whatever, so that they tell the person, not even necessarily women. I mean, it goes men too, to tell the person on the other side what they want to hear. See, that's why I mean there's just so many, like you said, it's just a blanket of this stuff that goes on, and I feel bad for people. I feel not that they're gullible or anything like that. It's just these people know, it's like with your husband, people like that, they know how to push the buttons.
Yes. And that's the other thing about the senior sociopaths is they've been doing it all their lives. I mean, they get better at it. They learn what works. So, well, there's that. That's part of it. And then there's the other part where often they also get to the point where they just don't even bother anymore. I mean, when they're younger, they often like try to pretend to have a heart. And, by the time they get, 60 years old or something, they don't even bother pretending anymore. It's like, it's done.
Now, the question that was going through my mind was, is it like it is with the phone scam, with the online scammers, where as the relationship progresses, the person that the sociopath will try to keep you away from your family. Where they'll try to isolate you more, so
Yeah,
that you're in their world, and there's no one to say anything from the outside.
right. Isolation is a very typical strategy. And, they do that. That's pretty consistent because that enables them to maintain control over someone. And for example, like my ex-husband did that to me in that what they do, I mean, he wasn't following me around, like the story that you told in the beginning, but he like picked fights with my family, so now he doesn't want to go, to see my family. So now, if I go to see my family, he's, huffing and puffing, because, well, you're seeing your family, you're not seeing me, and all this other stuff. And that's just very typical, is that they make it uncomfortable for you to be around your friends and family. And so people stop seeing their friends and family and therefore lose their support systems.
Well, plus it makes it easier for them to manipulate you too,
Yes.
because if the friends and family are hearing that you're forking out thousands and thousands of dollars to this husband for his businesses, and they're not going well, they're the first ones that are going to stand up, come forward and say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if you tell them, because the other thing that
Right.
happens is that, I mean, I don't want to admit what's going on. I don't want to
Sure.
admit that I made a mistake, so I wasn't, laying out the gory details until like well after the fact.
Yeah, but you know what? Mothers always know. So I mean, if you're around your mother enough, or even your father, they could tell when you could act foofy all you want around your mother and father, and they can tell when you're not steady, no matter
This
what.
is true. But my father made the point, because I've actually been on TV a few times telling this
Hmm.
story. But my father made the point, she's a grown woman. She's 40 years old. I can't tell her what to do,
Right.
which is true. And friends and family, even if they suspect something's wrong, they trust that you know what you're doing, and they don't want to rain on your parade.
Hmm.
So consequently, a lot of people say nothing.
This is true. Well, and you look at the phone scammers. A lot of that goes on too, until the family realizes it's too late. Because then at some point, the mother or grandmother's coming over and saying, "Well, I don't have enough groceries, or I don't have enough of this. Will you help me?" And then they're going, "Well, you have all your retirement." Well, no, I don't,
Hmm. Yeah.
for that stuff. Yeah, it's scary. It's scary. So what can women do? I mean, when they meet somebody new, what can they do? I mean, how do they ferret it out?
Well, there's
Or
actually,
even men, for that answer. I'm sorry, men and women.
yes, men and women. There's actually three steps to protecting yourself. The first step is to know that they exist. Okay. Now, this is the hard part. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, "I never knew people like this existed." Now, well,
Hmm.
they do, and so that's the first point. We need to understand that they exist. The second is to know the warning signs. I talked about a few of them, but you could get my red flags book, or you can
Sure.
go online. I mean, there's lots of lists and checklists that you could look at to find out what some of the warning signs are. But the third and most important step is to trust your instincts. We all have intuition. Our intuition evolved over millennia to protect us from predators. So, we get that bad feeling, you get a gut feeling, a reaction, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, whatever it is, you get a warning that something isn't quite right. And many people do. I mean, I asked about this in one of my surveys for the red flags book. I asked, did you have a warning that something wasn't right about this person? 72% of people said yes. And then if you add in the people who actually someone else told them there was a problem, or the sociopath that even laid out, oh, I'm bad news, which sometimes they say, but people are like, well, I can change it, my love will make a difference. So no, it's not going to make a difference. But anyway, it's like 90% of us get some kind of a warning that there's a problem. So the key is that when you get the warning, to pay attention and do something about it.
Or it's one of my particular favorites is the guy that got, as far as the men go, good for women too, but the guy that's been married 3 or 4 times. And when you ask him about it, he'll say, "Oh, but they were all psycho. They were all this. They were all that." I mean, that's like whoop, red flag right there, because something's going on.
Yeah, that's a good one.
To look out for stuff like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
just frightening because there's just so much of this that goes on, and people don't realize it. I mean, it could be your neighbor next, like you say, it could be the neighbor next door who looks like they've got a really great life with their husband or whatever, and you're hello and cordial to them, and you don't realize this is going on until all of a sudden there's a big blowout, or they're getting, or she's getting evicted, he or she's getting evicted because there's no money.
Right. Yes. The fact of the matter is that the numbers are really staggering. But depending on which study you look at, somewhere between 5.5% to 17.5% of the population could have one of these personality disorders. So if you look at the number of adults in the United States, that means we live among 31 million sociopaths, and they're everywhere. So people really need to be aware about this.
And just yeah, I know you're not a doctor and all this. Why do you think that is? Is it the way our society's built and designed, or is it just people are off their rockers?
It's highly genetic.
Okay.
So what happens is, people can be born with a predisposition to this disorder. And then there's this interaction between nature and nurture, so that if someone has a genetic predisposition, then they get bad parenting. And if their parent's a sociopath, they're going to get bad parenting. Then it just comes around. So that's a big part of it. Although there are some other indications that, especially like narcissism, might have some more social roots, because we don't have the sense of community now that we had years ago. I mean, you mentioned early on about people in the 50s. Well, it was much more cohesive in the 50s. So I'm not sure of the interaction between that and genetics. Maybe there isn't any, but you can pick up some of this, based on the environment itself. And we're not taught to be empathetic. We're not taught to care about the community anymore, and it's everybody's out for themselves. So that factors into it, although most of it, is people who are born with a predisposition.
I find this all interesting, because like I said, I run into people in various stages of either that or like the people I mentioned in the beginning of the show. Where it's obvious what's going on. But I mean, you can't, like, you're right. You can't. I mean, the person's 40 years old. You can't go out and say, "Hey, look, I think you got a problem here." Because if they're madly in love with that other person, forget it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that people struggle with. On my website, lovefraud.com, is like, do you warn the next victim? And I actually say that if you can do it safely, you should. And by safely, I mean you don't jeopardize certainly your physical safety, but also your finances, your reputation, because they can lash out. So if you can warn somebody safely, I think that you should at least try. Now, if you try, one of three things is going to happen. Either the person's going to believe you and end the involvement, or they're not going to believe you because the sociopath has already said that you're crazy and, jealous and all this other stuff. Or the third thing is that they won't believe you right away, but then when they start to see bad behavior, they say, oh, that's what they're talking about. So you have to be fine with whatever happens. But so I do suggest that if you can do it safely, it's good to at least try. And I know that, I've heard from people who were grateful that they were warned. I've also heard from people who wished they had been told. So you can try. If you can do it safely, you can try.
Now, for the person that's involved, when they finally get to that breaking point and they want to get away from this sociopath, how do they do it? Because, like in your case, I'm not saying it was easy, but you found the box. He wasn't around. It was easier to break. It was a little easier to break the ties, and just he comes home and you're not there.
Right. It all depends on the nature of the relationship and the level of involvement. If you're married to this person and you have like all kinds of financial ties and things like that, you have to be very strategic about how you do this, because if you want to get a divorce and you want to try and get what's yours as far as the assets are concerned, well, you may need to get the paperwork, and you need to do that before you tell them, because once you say you want a divorce, everything's out the window, it's gone. And there's quite a bit of strategy to doing this, but it is possible. The main thing is that once you figure out you're dealing with a sociopath, the last thing you should do is go up to this person and say, I know you're a sociopath, or something. I mean, you want to keep it to yourself while you figure out how to put together an exit plan.
Absolutely. Donna, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
For coming on. And this is something this show that does paranormal stuff the majority of the time. But as I said in my email to you, I'm also a journalist. I covered crimes in courts for 5 years, and so I like to mix it up with stuff like this. Last night we had a great topic as well, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I want to get the word out, stuff like this. I've even had Scam and Scammers Action here on Facebook on the show as well, because I used to work with them, and I'm not going to say what I did, but I used to do, I used to follow them. I'll just say that. And it's just something near and dear to my heart to get the word out for people, so they don't fall into these traps and stuff. And after this is, after you're off the air, I will show your website and I will show your books so people know what they are.
Okay.
And they could try to get them. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate it. And maybe sometime in the future we could have you on again to talk more about this stuff. But this is so important to get the word out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. And how can people reach you? Because you said something about videos and stuff. So
yes. Well, my website is lovefraud.com. And I have lots of articles there. I have a YouTube channel. I do a YouTube show every week, so you can find the videos there. We also have webinars, and I do personal consultations. A lot of people call me. Typically what they're looking for is validation that they're dealing with what they think they're dealing with. So just come to Love Fraud, and everything's there.
And what is your YouTube channel?
It's called Love Fraud Lessons on YouTube. Yeah.
That's where you guys can look. All right, ma'am. Well, you have a good evening, and thank you so much. And
You're
good
welcome.
luck to you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Yeah, that's something near and dear to my heart. I've seen it over and over with people, and it's just something that needs to be brought out. Anyway, tomorrow we're shifting back to paranormal. Tomorrow, Anthony Quinata is going to be with us. He is a medium, and he purchased a haunted doll. And he's had this haunted doll in his possession for years. You can even Google it and do research on this thing. It's called Harold the Haunted Doll. And its reputation is just as sinister, if not worse, than Annabelle. Okay, because we all know about Annabelle, right? The movie, and the John and the Zaffis family, and the Warrens and all that. We got Harold the Haunted Doll that we're going to be talking about tomorrow at 6:30. So I'm excited about that. A little shift of gears. Remember, Saturday is the event at California Haunts Ghostly Events with Nancy Matz. We're looking to sell a few more tickets here. We've got 6 left to go, and if you're interested, come on over on the page and sign up over there. It's that easy. Also, I'm over on TikTok this morning. The dog literally ate my homework this morning. So I have a bunch of stuff I have to write up tonight because she did eat my homework. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And if you're watching from YouTube, please subscribe. There's that little ghost down in the bottom right-hand corner. And he's got a Sherlock Holmes hat on and a magnifying glass, and that's our mascot. And if you want to subscribe to hear more videos like this, and check it out, because we've got like 250 videos over there, and they're on different topics. Okay, I just don't, as you can see, I just don't focus on the paranormal. If you're watching from Facebook, please be sure to follow. Hit that follow button. Same thing with Twitch. If you're watching over at Twitch, hit that follow button, because we're looking for followers and stuff, and we're going to have special events over on Facebook, so it's going to be kind of interesting. We're going to be doing events from Facebook. We're going to be doing events for Meetup, so we're going to have a bunch of events. But I want to thank everybody for coming today. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 people anyway. Okay? Also, again, please subscribe to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. Please follow. And you see that little sign thing at the bottom of the page? That's because the Paranormal Team is a nonprofit. Well, technically a nonprofit. We do not take money or funds to go out and do ghost investigations. So the only way we make any kind of thing to support the team or the radio show is via donations. So you can find it in your heart to donate a little bit to help me pay the bills and pay the internet. That would be great. PayPal.me at California Haunts. Or if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, go on over to Venmo and then just simply type in California Haunts. It's that easy. But I'd really appreciate that too. But anyway, I will see you tomorrow. But right now, I'm going to link you up with her information, so you can get her books if you feel the need and all that. So let's make sure I get the right one. Let's see. I had to run. I renamed all this stuff. So, oh, there we go. Webpage, lovefraud.com. Understanding the Sociopath, and the other set of books is Seduced by a Sociopath, Recovering from the Sociopath, Senior Sociopaths, Dealing with a Sociopath, Estafa Amorosa, Alertas Rojas, and Love Fraud. And those books can either be found at her website or at Amazon. Again, thank you guys for coming, and I'm glad you were all here to hear this. It's very important to get the word out to your friends. If they haven't seen the show, kind of direct them over to see the show on the replay. I think it's something important. Anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good evening.